Welcome to Eye on the Cure, a podcast from the Foundation Fighting Blindness, providing science research, news, and insights about the world of vision and blinding diseases.
Welcome, everyone, to the Eye on the Cure podcast. I'm your host, Ben Shaberman with the Foundation Fighting Blindness, and I'm very pleased to have as my guest Dr. George Magrath, and he is Chief Executive Officer at Opus Genetics. And as many of you probably know, Opus is an inherited retinal disease gene therapy company that the foundation established about 5 years ago. And we're also invested in the company through our venture philanthropy arm, the RD Fund. And excitingly, last October, Opus merged with a company called Occufire. And George was CEO of Occufire and now continues as CEO with the new company, which has taken the name Opus. And I'm sure many of you also know that the head of Opus previously was Ben Shaberman, and he continues on as the Opus president. And excitingly, the company has numerous inherited retinal disease gene therapies in its pipeline. LCA5 gene therapy is the furthest along in clinical development. It's showing some exciting results in phase 1/2. And we're going to talk to George about LCA5 and much of the rest of Opus's pipeline in a minute. But first, George, welcome to Eye on the Cure. It's great to have you.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. It's great to be here, and we're very much appreciative of the foundation support.
Well, we very much appreciate the really great work that you're doing in the retinal disease gene therapy space. So I'm going to give a little more background on George before we begin our conversation. He is a board-certified ophthalmologist with extensive clinical, business, and financial experience. And prior to joining Occufire and Opus, he was CEO of Lexitas Pharma Services, a leading contract research organization in ophthalmology. And before Lexitas, he served as the medical director at Hovian, where his team was responsible for the development of assets in ophthalmology, dermatology, and the respiratory world. Dr. Magrath began his career as an equity analyst at Edison Investment Research, where he covered small and mid-sized pharma and biotech companies. And he holds a Master of Applied Economics from Johns Hopkins, an MBA from the Citadel, and he got his medical degree from the Medical University of South Carolina. That is quite the diverse background, George. And I'd like to start off our conversation having you reflect on your early days as an ophthalmologist and telling us what inspired you to move out of ophthalmology into industry. Specifically, equity investing is where you kind of started your post-ophthalmology career.
Yeah, the weirdest part is probably my undergraduate career, because I started off in finance, and I really loved biology and chemistry, and so I ended up with a degree in biologic chemistry with a minor in inorganic chemistry and a minor in accounting. So it's
wow, that's
unique.
Yeah, those are two separate kinds of challenges, science and math. Pretty bold.
So what I'm most interested in is getting treatments to patients, right? Because as an ophthalmologist, the one thing that you are handicapped with is the treatments you have available at your disposal, right? So you're only as good as your best medicine, and you're only as good as your best surgical procedure that you have. And that is a way that you can really amplify your impact. Now, the world goes around by the allocation of resources. And so I'm very interested, and this is the reason I got interested in equity analysis and then into what I do now, is that the development of new medicines is completely dependent on the resources that are available to allocate to those new medicines, right? So if you can't get an investment or if you can't get funding to do a trial, then it's not going to get done. So fundamentally, you have to solve for that problem. And that's exactly, honestly, what we're doing at Opus Genetics, is trying to solve for how do you develop in the ultra rare space that intuitively or historically has gotten less investment than other areas, right? It's very easy to think about investment into things like diabetes and obesity. It's a whole nother thing to think about how do you get resources allocated to the development of a drug in, say, LCA5 or RDH12 or any of the 7 gene therapies that we have. And that's what really gets me interested. And that's really the fundamental focus of Opus, right? Is really solving that problem, because we have great science. Like, the science is out of Gene Bennett's lab at University of Pennsylvania, Eric Pierce at Mass Eye and Ear, and also from the University of Florida. So really great science that has a high likelihood of success if it can get the resources allocated. And the foundation has done a great job of getting it started. And now our job is to pick up and get it across the finish line. And that's what we're doing. And just one more thing, that's why the public vehicle is so important for this, is that you have, in order to get the resources needed to actually get things, really available commercially or to patients, you have to have an investment thesis that is solid. And having a publicly traded NASDAQ listed vehicle under the ticker symbol IRD is really allows us to pull together resources to roll these things up and actually make a viable investment thesis. Whereas any one of these gene therapies by themselves may be harder to make an investment thesis around. And if you make the investment thesis work, then the capital will come and the team will be enabled to bring these treatments to patients. That's what I care about. That's why that's my entire life.
That's awesome that you have that perspective and you kind of made the leap out of what I would say is a little less risky of a profession to move out of just analyzing companies to actually running a company that's in a fairly challenging space. And so we mentioned that last year, Ocuphire acquired Opus, and Ocuphire had and still has some non-retinal disease therapies in its portfolio. What inspired the company to take that rather bold step to go in this rare inherited retinal disease space? And what's happening with the other assets that aren't related to the IRD space?
So it's a great question, Ben. So the company Ocuphire had 2 primary assets. One was an eye drop called phentolamine ophthalmic solution. So phentolamine ophthalmic solution is indicated for reversal of dilation, and it's under the trade name Rezumvi. And so when you go to the eye doctor, you get your eyes dilated, and you have 2 options. One is you can spend the rest of the day dilated. The other is you can have this drop, and within an hour or so, you're back to normal. And so it's a pretty cool value proposition for everyday patients. The next thing is presbyopia, where we just finished phase 3. And that's, presbyopia is the need for reading glasses. So if you put this eye drop in, it reduces your reliance on reading glasses. So that'll be submitting an SNDA to the FDA for approval later this year. A third indication is for dim light disturbances, which is glaring halos around lights after keratorefractive surgery. And that's finished 1 phase 3 and is into a 2nd phase 3 now. So that eye drop is pretty cool, but it's been partnered with a large pharma partner because of how prevalent the diseases are. And so it's being developed and commercialized by Viatris. So that's no longer a lead asset for Ocuphire. So the second asset that Ocuphire had was a pill for diabetic eye disease. And that pill was studied in a phase 2 trial and missed its endpoint. And so when it missed its endpoint, we decided that for our company with our resources, it was better to pivot to a new product. And that was where we found Opus Genetics.
So obviously that's very exciting for our community, people with inherited retinal diseases. So we're very excited that you made that pivot. For you as CEO leading the company, of course, how does that change what you do, even maybe how you lead, moving from these assets for more common diseases to the what I'll call the boutique world or the rare world of inherited retinal diseases like LCA5?
Oh, I think it's completely different, right? So the rare disease world is all about sort of personalized care, personalized medicine. It's very different in that respect as compared to some of the largest indications in medicine like presbyopia. And so it's much more about engagement with the patients, engagement with the physicians, and engagements with the regulatory agencies too, to figure out what are the right ways to go about proving that your medicine is safe and efficacious for the patients.
Right, right. And clinical trial design, I expect, would be a whole different ballgame and challenging because you're dealing with rare diseases and you have fewer patients to potentially enroll in the trials.
Oh, it really is. I mean, it's fewer patients. And it's got a lot more complexities because these diseases can be quite severe, as you know. And so you really, I mean, the way we approach it at Opus is that we have an ongoing dialogue with the agency, with the FDA, and it's led mostly by our key opinion leaders, like the physicians in the community, where we are just kind of openly talking to them about what is the right trial design and what's the right way to go about getting these drugs developed.
Right. And that's so important to have open communications with the regulators. So glad to hear that's happening. Let's talk a little bit about your pipeline now. Maybe starting with LCA5, that's been in the clinic a while, and then talking about some of the other gene therapies that are moving toward the clinic.
Yeah, LCA5 is super exciting because we treated the first 3 adults and saw, partial restoration of vision on multiple endpoints with that. And that was really quite remarkable. And, remarkable enough that the FDA awarded a grant to support the program. And it's gotten the RMAT designation, Regenerative Medicine Advanced Technologies designation from the FDA. So it's gotten a lot of support from the FDA. And where we are now is we've enrolled 3 children or 3 adolescents recently at the University of Pennsylvania. And we'll publicly announce the results of those 3 children coming up in the third quarter of this year. And so it's coming up imminently. So LCA5 is really exciting. And we're hopeful that, should the kids respond well to the treatment, that there might be a path to sort of an accelerated clinical development program going forward.
Right. And with a different company who I won't mention in the podcast, we saw some what I'll call new flexibility with the FDA to move to that phase 3 a little more easily than companies traditionally could. So that's exciting. So what's next to move into a clinical trial in your pipeline?
So the best one program will be next, and that one is going to be treating patients this fall. And so that one is moving along pretty quickly. And in the first quarter of next year, we'll have some initial data from the best one program. And then right behind that, we just recently announced some support for the RDH12 program from the RDH12 Alliance, and also some support for the MERTK program. And so those 2 programs have significant support from the patient advocacy communities.
Right, right. And I know we're funding some translational work at Penn Vet for the rhodopsin gene therapy.
That's right. Yeah.
So that's moving forward as well. And then I believe we've covered everything. And then there's also one more gene therapy, NMNAT1.
Yeah, there's 2 more. There's NMAT1 and then CNGB1. And so both of those, carry some funding as well. The interesting thing about how we think about it as a publicly traded company is that we typically have really good support from grants to get these things, to get the preclinical work done. But when it gets to the clinic, the quantums of money needed are typically larger, and we tend to fund those using our equity dollars, right, from the stock market. And so that's a unique advantage that we have to be able to try to fund these clinical programs. And so that's kind of how we think about it, is that the equity dollars typically go towards the clinical development, and then the grant funding does a really great job at the preclinical aspects of it.
And it sounds like that strategy is serving you well, given how big the pipeline is and how much is moving forward. So
it certainly is. Yeah.
I applaud you for that. One thing I wanted to talk about, which at first blush may seem kind of boring and technical, but I think it's a really important aspect to therapy development or gene therapy development, and that's manufacturing. I know that's a challenging thing that perhaps a lot of our audience doesn't understand. How do you go about setting up a manufacturing program or using a manufacturing program to develop gene therapies?
So this is very critical to how we think about the world in ultra rare. So in ultra rare disease, to go back to the very beginning of this conversation, you're limited by the resources that are entrusted with you when you're developing. And therefore, you need to be very judicious with that. So one of the first principles that we use is that we keep things simple on manufacturing, because if you go down a rabbit hole with manufacturing, you can end up spending a lot of money. And if you spend a lot of money, then you have less resources available to actually get the treatments to patients. So we use well-known vectors, well-known promoters, well-known capsids that are fairly straightforward to manufacture. And that's how we approach it, is the more you change from what's out there, the further you go away from, say, the approved products that are out there, Luxturna in particular, the more risk you insert into a program. And the more risk you insert into the program, the more expensive it becomes. And so our goal is to get these things done quickly and efficiently. And so we try to keep it simple.
That's great. And, at the end of the day, you can have the best concept, the best therapy, but if you don't make it well and make it affordably, then you don't have a whole lot. So,
Ben, you're exactly right. The thing that kills most programs is manufacturing, like you mentioned. It's not the clinical. It's the ability to actually get what you want to do made.
Right. And we could have a whole additional conversation on how manufacturing works, but for the sake of time, maybe another podcast. I did do a podcast on manufacturing a couple of years ago, but let's keep moving forward here in the discussion. And really, my last comment or question is just about what's happening in the IRD space now, the gene therapy development space for IRDs. I know from talking to my colleagues in the RD fund for the past few years, things have been tough. Biomedical investment has slowed considerably. But when I hear how creative you are, Opus is, and I hear about some other companies in our space finding investment, it seems like things might be getting better. What do you think?
In particular, in our space, in the IRD space, we're getting a lot of attention from investors right now. So you've seen a company you mentioned earlier, Atsena, is a great company doing wonderful work in X-linked retinoschisis. Got a really nice financing round earlier this year. We did a really nice financing round around the same time. Others have as well. The Stargardt is getting a lot of attention. Like this is the place in ophthalmology right now where the field is moving to. I think the field is moving away from, say, wet AMD, things like that, and more towards novel mechanisms for unmet needs, which IRDs have the largest of that. And so It's a recognition of good science by the investing community and the ability to impact patients. And so it's a great thing. And in particular, I think it's a unique thing. I mean, to really to toot our own horn for just a second, it's a very unique thing and a wonderful thing for the community to have a publicly traded company under IRD. I mean, there literally is a company that people can buy the stock of and invest in and help move the mission forward that's dedicated to inherited retinal degenerations. And that's a very unique thing to have. And it's a very cool thing for the overall field. And I hope we can move the field forward.
I agree. Having the IRD ticker symbol is pretty exciting. And I have to say, I've been in the space now 20 years. I started with the foundation as a science writer back in 2004. I never thought we'd see the day when there would be a company with an IRD ticker symbol, but exciting that exists. And that's not any type of recommendation to buy the stock or not buy the stock, but it's great that it's out there.
Mm-hmm.
George, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy day as the leader of Opus to chat with us about the company, a little bit about your career, and all the great IRD gene therapies in development. We, again, applaud you for your heroic work to move these therapies forward.
No, of course, Ben. Thank you for having us. And we're very appreciative of the foundation support and the patient community support. I mean, it really is critical to everything we're trying to do.
Very much agreed. Very much agreed. And we're very pleased to be a supporter of Opus. So, George, I'll let you go. Listeners, thank you as always for joining Eye on the Cure. It's great to have you, and we look forward to having you back for the next episode.
This has been the Eye on the Cure podcast. To make an impact, donate now at fightingblindness.org.